Welcome to our continuing series of virtual voices focusing on the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Our speaker today is Mr. Ippolito Leotta, who has begun working in television in Milan since the early 1980s. Mr. Leotta's association with InterTV, then the leading content provider for the new Italian television marker, introduced him to Italy's finest journalistic and creative talent, and thus started his career in television. In 1982, he moved to Baltimore, Maryland, and worked for ABC on experimental programs. In 1987, he moved to New York to work with the CBS and Eurovision in America, in addition to building a career. And in 1990, he began the Global Vision Group with a business relationship forged with some of Europe's most prestigious networks. The Global Vision Group has evolved from a news-gathering organization into a multi-faceted media company, which is focused on presenting information that is valid, objective, and morally persuasive. Mr. Leotta says all business is personal. He then puts forth his effort in hiring a diverse and creative group of employees in order to perpetually integrate new ideas. On any given day, you may find several nationalities represented. However, as an example of his expertise in a niche market, each individual member contributes uniquely into the work of the group. Over to you, Mr. Leotta.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, from whatever part of the world you are, for giving me the time to introduce myself, my experience within the international media, the private sector, and the transition that I made just a couple of years ago into the nonprofit world, and the reason why for it. I'd like to begin to talk about my experience and the yin and yang, the plus and minus of the influence of mass media into preserving and educate humanity about our culture, our existence and coexistence of the people and also the institution. I started back in the 90s working for 3 different networks, Italian, primarily the Europeans. And my main role was actually to be filling the gap between the mentality of the United States and how to approach news stories and how the European would see the same story. The interesting part is that even if the language they were speaking was understandable between English and Italian or French, the view of a story, it was totally different. Sometimes dictated by different political view, different interests, different social background. But that really got me started to say, well, this has to be more than a news. It has to be more important than just simply delivering the news. And I expanded to different countries, and I expand my news experience into creating content, a documentary, which is a different part of the media. At the end, I realized that media in general are fundamental, are today channel to educate different parts of the world, to educate and to expose the cross reference, the cross experience, the cross cultural between nations and people. But at the same time, the media also has the responsibility to not dictate or impose what a Western culture is to another part of the developed world. Sometimes that's it's foreseen as intimidating and creates a big, huge disappointment and controversy between nations. So the media in general for much important it is in maintaining the cultural education of it, they are not doing that much in sustaining that. Because I remember working at the very beginning with journalists, then they used to go after the story, go out in the field, learn from the actual horse mouth what the story was, and get their own opinion, right or wrong, but this going through that loop of understanding what they're actually going to report to whatever country they were reporting to. Now, unfortunately, there is the globalization of the information, such as Google, such as many other situations, which are very important in preserving our culture, but also made the journalistic part, the delivery of the news, a lot more flat, not substantive, accepting the information for what they are, not double checking, made possible for the reporting to be reported quickly, immediately. The best news is the first one coming, not necessarily the truth, but just the headline, it's what sells. So, and it's not a downplaying to the journalism at all. Sometimes their network, their bosses impose that because the demand for news, it's a lot larger than going in depth over different stories. So that really took a toll of delivering the news in reporting it and telling the truth. And that definitely was a downside of the media, then kind of pushed me away and pushed me into what I'm trying to do today. The good side is then Google or any social media does help, providing what there is a fine line between the political anarchy, meaning doing whatever they want, and bringing people on the screen and show the reality of situation. Media is important to maintain the boundary of civilization, and kind of covers a little bit where the political gap of it's lacking of it, meaning sometimes the self-interest push things in a certain direction and the media will expose that. So it keeps the balance of it. And that's definitely about news, which is not everything, but it's important and dictate the mode of people watching the media, reading the media, listening, or get their knowledge from it. There was an aspect, and it's still in turmoil, still in a transition phase, in my opinion. More and more media are opinionated and less reporting and more commentator that will at least say confuse more the people in what's real, what's not. We have a huge experience on the last election, not the last, the one before. It is not pro against one political president, the other one, but it shows how a major media, by reporting something, made it possible to somebody to be a president, and it shows that the same media going against the same person, then indirectly they support it by maybe mocking him or by maybe just make him as a buffoon. So their responsibility rely on know how to report and how to comment the news, to let the people decide for it. And that's one aspect. The major aspect is entertainment is instead to get with the time, to be able to learn what the tool of the trades are. People at home watch TV, do not know if you have a 5 camera watching this particular program or the lights are better than other one. They don't know about the technical things. They only know then they're culture educated to see something that appeals good, it's entertaining, and they stick with the channel. Otherwise, they just flip it. So the media should be able to spend more time to upgrade the cultural program, which is already very limited. In the US, we have PBS. Besides PBS, maybe there is 1 or 2 channels, then be able to do some other program that's cultural. The major mainstream network they do something at 2 o'clock in the morning. So it's difficult to get cultural information or cultural education out of the mainstream television. Social media is helping a lot, but mainstream television, mainstream media does have the responsibility to invest more and to make it more appealing, more entertaining, so people can stay tuned and not just learn, but also be entertained. And that's the gimmick. That's the way to be able to entertain the people. So it's a complicated part of my experience within the past 30 years with my global vision, and it continues. So that pushed me to move me personally to delegate of the management of my company, which is, for anybody who's in business, when you create a company, it's a baby. So it's no longer a financial thing. It's your own creation. So it's hard to delegate. It's hard to be able to move away from it. But the need to be able to create alternative content, and it's not of the serve of few, content that's completely clear, good or bad, from any specific need, but more open to anyone. That's what really brought me to open up a foundation, nonprofit, which, by the way, my left hand is financing my right hand. So it's definitely free from any obligation of it. My foundation, which is Freedom View, which I opened right before the pandemic, it's really to tackle some issue of coexistence. My main experience is, I think if people are educated about other countries, which can be through a personal relation to somebody else from a different part of the world, to a passion for a singer or for an actor or for a specific food, will lower the level of prejudice and will open up the frontiers of the unknown, meaning to be able to explore, to travel to the country, to learn about the individual you met. Sometimes you fell in love, sometimes you do business with the person, sometimes you just explore or eat their food. That knowledge, which has to be done within a audiovisual content and different event, will help definitely to understand people, to coexist and profit from each other, profit in cultural level and educational level. That's, to me, a key, the key program that I envision for my foundation. Of course, I'm using the skill of, the trade of my skill, meaning I know how to create content. I know how to put it in a different country because we're doing it with my main company. But the issue are very important now more than ever because of the fear of diversity, which at the same time is the most intriguing part of our globe. Diversity means everything, means the beauty of it, the knowledge, the culture, the education, exploring. It's really life itself, to be able to coexist and learn about each other. So that is really the main reason why I want to do, and I continue to do now with the foundation, to create content. I get involved in some of the Native American. They may have had a bad rap in the beginning, by moving into their land and be able to put them in a separate field to maintain their heritage. And talking to them, I was in Oklahoma about a month ago, talking to them with all the political and the social issue they had. Their main issue was, how do we preserve our heritage? How do we educate our children to keep alive their heritage, be integrated in society, which is now a multiple cultural society. I think that's important to believe in the values, to have faith in our heritage, Even if it didn't make any sense now, it made sense at the time. So certain things sometimes even look politically incorrect, but I had a sense and a reason for it, right or wrong, and it's not for us to judge it today, but to learn from it. It's important to accept what you like and you don't like. It's important also to understand that your freedom ends where mine begins, and vice versa. That's respect. So really, the media has a huge responsibility to keep teaching and to be the most important channel across cultural education around the world. In the foundation, I'm hoping to continue with that with the respect of learning that certain visual things are not appealing to other parts of the world, and be able to integrate it, be able to create content by using multi-article director, creator, writers, then will be able to explain a particular issue or language or a culture or a musical under different lights, not just in one considered Western civilization. It's not just that. I would say that overall, all the major, also the Hollywood part, has to implement that. I would say then media still remains the most important vehicle of understanding, of peaceful transition between one culture to the other, or integration between one culture and another. But it's not really doing the full job. It's doing what is the necessary need of commercial point of it. The audience, the share of the audience is what dictate the editorial of a network. And the investment they do is strictly to support their sponsor. The content and production they made, it's only target to the few of their audience, and not exploring, which in my opinion would be a larger possibility, also economical for them, to achieve a larger audience, and, a benefit out of it. With foundation, beside the project with the Native American, I have a few projects that I haven't started yet. Then it's part of the program in the next 5 to 10 years. Are also the capitalism. We mentioned before is lots of nonprofit just be able to raise money to do more self-proclamation, just to put themselves in the marketplace and be able to have more glory of it, and really invest in very minimum what they do. And it's not a criticism. It's just the way the market dictates the possibility of survival in any market field, nonprofit or private. The truth is, in my opinion, is then capitalism has a large part of it, and it's okay also to raise money. But the important thing is your time as a founder and the people who work on it has to be equal, if not more, of what you produce or whatever you take in. It's very important. Then, in my experience with a nonprofit, is then you have to take yourself out what's rightfully good to pay everybody or to do something when you do for a production or for a project. You need to be not be put in a position to compromise the mission of the foundation. The mission of the foundation should stand on its own. Talking to Marian a few weeks ago, it says, my goal is for the foundation to stand on its own, with or without me eventually, not just in a decision-making, but in projecting the mission of the foundation. And that's vital. Capitalism has to have a part in investing in helping the nonprofit in general, but not because it's a tax write-off. It's because at the end, improving the cultural and educational and also the charity part of nonprofit will help out to bring society a notch above. That means less people are going to be taker and more people will become provider. And there is an income for humanity. If you lower the standard of poverty, and when I say poverty, and I'm not talking about just in possibility of food or the basic need of life, but culturally, if you improve the possibility of people to be able to dream, to be something, to be able to know, if I cannot do something here, maybe I can do in France, maybe I can do in Germany, maybe I can do in India, maybe I can learn from it, that will make those people eventually be providers and no longer taker, and themselves teaching to the next generation. And there is an income for the world of capitalism. Will be an extra client, an extra consumer, an extra whatever it is. But for humanity, will be somebody who learned, from the past and became the future. And that's the way of life. It's real life. So don't want to be too philosophical about it, but all these items are part of educating and preserving our heritage. There is no future without knowing our past. History teach people to coexist, to learn from their mistake, and to move forward. So my foundation is definitely a cross-reference between a political news to a cultural and heritage preservation of humanity in different aspects, again, in musical, entertaining, traveling, food, any type of culture, language, which is also very important. New York on its own has 800 speaking language. This is just 5 boroughs of a city, and you can actually speak, learn, read the news, listen to the radio, or watch a local TV, maybe in streaming, maybe on a local channel, in about 800 different languages. That shows you then if you really put the effort to it, you can coexist with all the problematic of coexisting. So that really is the target that I foresee, with lots of ups and downs, of course, and impact. Not too much for a long speech, maybe because of my background, but that really summarize of my experience in media, in the mainstream media, and my transition, why I needed to do at this time of my life, open up a foundation, continue to create the content for a better need, and free from any commitment that are not purely cultural or educational. I think it's a lot shorter than usually you're used to it, but it's I'm open to any question from you if you do have it.
Thank you so much for talking. And
I hope it was not too confusing. This is really my first one, so please be kind with me. I work behind the scene. I don't work in the front of the scene. I manage to put people in front of the camera to be able to do what they do, but I'm not usually the one who stays in front of the camera. I like to stay behind the scene in every project that I do.
Well, actually, I agree with that, but I have a question for you. Please. The media in the United States uses its power of exposure to present their opinions and not facts. And the problem have exacerbated when the Citizens United was granted the right by the Supreme Court for corporations to contribute vast amounts of money to the US elections. And this was when George W. Bush was president in 2002. And so now we see the result of this. But unfortunately, People are not addressing this issue except for public citizen. So I would like to have your comments on this, because you know as well as I do, if you have Facebook and Twitter contribute millions to Democratic candidates, this really does not promote fair elections. This is what can be expected in Russia, but not in the United States. And yes, this is what we have now.
Yeah, unfortunately, not only I agree with you, I will go much further than that. You know, it's in Europe, there are some rule and regulation during the election where there is a bipartisan law where if you give as a media 10 minutes to a candidate, you have to give equal space to the other candidate. So it's very important to balance that, at least for the exposure, for the audiovisual exposure, which is a major part on the public opinion to decide who to vote or not to vote. So that's a rule that I think should really be put in act here in the United States. That alone will not help. The fact that major media does influence a lot the election, it's the most parallel when you're talking about in a foreign country intervene and influence the opinion of people. We're talking about the US election, which may or may not be true, that it's not been proven. That's not for me to say that's a truth, that's not true, because none of that has been exposed to a proven and not proven fact to the court of law, and the law stands, not my opinion in this case. But the fact that social media or major media give more time and more biased time to one candidate instead of the other one, it's, to me, morally illegal. It's really a dictatorship. It's an imperialistic way. Let me go in further, and that's probably going to bite my behind one of these days. It's an imperialistic way to dictate who do we want, who do we not want to run for president or any other public position. The eternal fight here between the CNN and Fox, made the situation impossible for common people to better choose on the real ideal of any candidate. CNN, for example, was really the reason why the last president was elected. They're mocking and snubbing somebody that is an outsider in politics, forgetting that Ronald Reagan was an outsider in politics. Many other presidents were. Really got the people, the middle class or the inside land, what I call the middle American, furious about that. And maybe some of that, maybe a small percentage, I don't know, maybe went for the other person because he spoke out of his stomach, out of his, into it. Right or wrong, it doesn't matter. But that alone dictated a warp, a distorted image of a candidate, then maybe been seen in a different way, on the true way, if it's supposed the way it is, meaning delivering the news, not being a commentator, but be a reporter. And I think in a situation of that, being a reporter, it's vital instead of being a commentator. I mean, I've seen panels with 8, 9 people, all for one candidate, and no one of the 8, 9 people be in favor of the other candidate. That alone, to me, it's just like mind-boggling. How is that possible in a democratic country to do something like that? What's the difference between a dictatorship and a dictator media image? There is no difference in a cultural and educational of the public opinion. And that is something that I'm hoping when the troubles settle now, when maybe the United States will be back to be a little bit more united with a different opinion, but less divided they are in the last couple of elections, to find a way to impose some rule and regulation on fairness among candidates. You can't spend $1 billion, to be a president that alone is not fair to somebody who doesn't have the money, but has the content and the substance to be one. That's really buying a political position and not be fair to somebody who doesn't have $1 billion. So the impact in media gives to one candidate instead of the other one, it's humongous, and it's humongous also the monetary value of it. It makes them very unfair to anybody else who has the same possibility in talent, in ideals, in value, and not be able to be exposed equally and have the people, which is in the first page of our Constitution, to decide, who's right or wrong. Yeah, I'm hoping that we'll eventually work on that. I know as a mission, as a nonprofit, I have to shy away from political, but I will find a way, I hope, my lawyer will not smack me on that, I will find a way to create a content that is not political, but it's educational and make some fairness in the political arena. I hope I can find a way to do that. I know I could creatively, but has to be structured in a certain way and has to be also been distributed. That's one major thing about my foundation, and using the old content in the present content of my company, we can distribute in about 11 different countries. So that would be having a nice exposure. And it's far ahead, hopefully not too far ahead, but that's a must. That's a must do for the people, for us. I'm a dual citizen, so I'm an Italian-American citizen. So my heart is in one place, and in the other place, my life is here. But the rest of my family is overseas. But like me, there's a million other people, that have the same shoes than I am. So I would like to be able to for people to have a fair view of things, and not use certain situation like the immigrant, other things as a political message of the moment, because it puts fire on already existing fire, or because by being the opposite, I gain respect from the social politically correct, which is not. So that's important.
Well, thank you very, very much. And I certainly hope and wish to give you every possible help that we can, and so that you can succeed in your mission, because I also feel is the same as you, that it is egregious that this is happening in the United States, a country where most people came here because they felt that it was fair to everybody and not just the oligarchs. Yeah. So over to you, Ariel, with questions.
Thank you. So my first question that I have is, with the new role of social media becoming the prominent news source and source of attention for kids, how do you suggest we navigate these platforms where content averages 15 seconds, and this is where these news sources and profiles are coming out and giving information, and so this is how kids are taking in?
Now, you say a source of tension or attention? I did not hear that. Attention, okay. When we're talking about kids, we're talking about infant or, 12 years up. So, that's when they start making up in their own mind.
Yeah, I'd say 12 years up, like from TikToks and Instagrams.
Yeah. Well, as a father, I'm not there yet. My kids is going to be 3 in September. So I already have huge issue about watching TV, what to watch, what not to watch. So definitely not going to be very liberal on that. But I think also the issue about that kind of social media like TikTok, unfortunately, has a huge influence on young kids. It's not just sometimes we say social media has the responsibility to it. Yes and no. You can use it in a different aspect. guns kill people. No, people kill people. That don't mean you have to liberate. You think, of course, you have to control. You need to put a rule and regulation about certain things. But same for social media like TikTok, which is really huge one. It's not just the media per se. It's also the blogger, the influencer that has a huge responsibility in what the kids believe and not believe. Kids at that age are still very they are in between what's reality, what's not reality. TikTok kind of rides on that quite a bit. And then you have tragedy or crazy tragedies of somebody who, jump out of the balcony because TikTok told them to. And I'm talking about kids that are like already 15. So I'm not talking about infant. There are so many of the situations that TikTok dictated to do a certain campaign of drinking in a certain way, and people get sick and die, kids. So how they control it, technically, I don't know. Can they block it or not block it? That becomes lack of freedom. It's a fine line. But I think in that too, responsibility primarily rely on your parents. Educating your kids, giving value, it's a big influence. It's not all, it's not everything, but it gives a big influence. Sometimes you can have two kids, one grows up to be a good one, and the other grows up to be a not so good one. And it's the same parents and same situation. And just influence with other kids or with the bad company or the good company help you to grow in a certain way. I think creating content for kids, it's more challenging than creating content for adults, like we were talking about before. You can't just have a boring talking heads talking about life. You need to make entertaining. My kids right now watch a new version of Mickey Mouse. At my age, Mickey Mouse was a certain things. Now Mickey Mouse, then she watch, are really educational because it tells you certain things, a certain moral to have it, at least this particular part of it, then helps you to learn something. And those are talking about kids at 3, some adults. But generation 11, 12, 13, 14, they have to be entertained. So I think content had to be really good out of it. They had to be really attractive. They had to be really, you have to push your envelope. You need to be able to make it entertaining to the point that you stick them to the TV for the right reason. Make a short version, don't make a long version, because teenager, the attention span is no longer than 10, 15 minutes if they're good at it, otherwise not even that. So it's important also then some investment in creating content for that has to be coming from the people that make a living out of creating content in social media, but also from parents. Parents so that still, in my opinion, my humble opinion, and I hope I'm right, the fundamental part of the education, or at least the root of the education, or of the good value that a kid will have when it grows up. And I hope I'm not wrong on that.
Thank you. The next question that I have is, how will you overcome the restrictions that certain ideologies put on their children on what they can watch and what is forbidden?
Wow. The certain ideology covers an aspect of many situations, which is not just cultural, sometimes religious, sometimes cultural. So it's difficult to make one rule for everybody, and it's impossible. Different society foresee things in a different way. That's really fundamental of crashing, and sometimes even in a war situation. You can't go in somebody's backyard dictating then our way of life or our way of looking or educating is the right way. Certain civilizations, certain race, certain people, they just evolve in a different ratio, a different aspect, a different speed than other one. It's not making them better or worse. It makes them different. So I think a good common sense and be able for still from parents, and also for those responsible in the creative area of content, to produce, educate, not just about your views that you have of life for your kids, but also to be connected with the society you live in. You know, I can be of a certain religious entity or a certain political opinion, but if you live in a society or in a cultural environment, then opens up to be able to do certain things. You got to find a middle ground. Let me use something simple so it doesn't step on anybody's toes. You know, my culture of food, because I'm Italian, it's uniqueness in its own way because we put a lot of effort, love, passion to it. So of course we like to have, you know, our kids or my kids to eat proper, you know, and to do not eat junk food. But the kids are going to go to school and he's going to go out with his friend. It's definitely going to be exposed to the certain type of junk food. So I'm using that as an example. So you cannot forbidden your kids not to see or do certain things. You have to teach them in the creating content or in the teaching as a parent to be able to balance the two things. Media, same as in media, the media has the power to balance, you know, the different type of education. So in the way the kids will eventually make their own opinion. The person, the adult, will eventually make their own opinion. So it's difficult to say you cannot do certain things. I think in the right time, the right situation, that's hopefully the sixth sense that anybody has will, you know, be more developed, will teach them, will find a way and the time to expose to something that is not for you to appreciate it, but for he or her to learn that exists. I don't know if I explained that myself to it, maybe it's too much, you know, in my home about this. So.
No, I think you did a wonderful job. Thank you. The next question that I have is, why did you leave Italy to continue your work? Do you find that the US is the most viable country to regulate truthful news?
Well, I think the US is the most valuable country to have opportunity to develop truthness. That's has been, it's a little less now, and hopefully we'll get back. So it's part of a cycle. I left Italy because my country, it's always been a country then politically, I hate to say not stable, but the image of political arena of my country has never been stable. In a sense, then it would not create a dictatorship, but it would not create a good opinion of our political arena. With that aspect, the possibility of create a fair job for everybody, or create the possibility for anyone to evolve into whatever they study, it's very limited. Not because of fairness, because really the structure of the country is not supporting. Now you can criticize why an evolved cultural country like Italy, which has been the beacon of culture for all the Europe, fell so behind in creating possibility of growing, you know, of growth for the next generation. And that's an anthropologist can probably tell you that. But it's a mind-boggling for me how a country with all the possibilities, so much cultural, kind of fell behind the possibility to give job and good job and good career and, you know, good evolving for the young generation. So that opens up the door for what they call the raccomandato, which is the people that have been recommended by somebody, a politician or a certain family, to get ahead. So now be able to make a career out of the value of your knowledge about who you know. And I found myself simply to be, I lost my father when I was 12, so to find myself to be the son of nobody's famous, and not to be, you know, somebody personal interest. So I was already having a good job. I was already working in media. I was also working in a time of history in media, which in Italy was a monopoly. And in that time, when I got into work in TV, a change from monopoly to multiple network. At that time, the Berlusconi group created the first private TV station. So it opens up the door to what was before a monopoly. But I also witnessed the change of a public television. The public television then was born and educated Italy how to read and write, and then became political and commercial at the same time. So running their network and their cultural part of as a business aspect, using some of the money that are tax, money from the people, and go after commercials. So taking away from the private sector the possibility to make some money. So the contortion, the twist of all this made me decide I have a good job, I'm making some good money, my life is going to be it at 20, and I cannot see myself having a limit at 20 years old. With the fact that I already knew my job and I already knew how to film and how to edit, I had a skill. So I said, let me try to go to the States. It was not for me to stay, it was for me to do 6 months, the most, to learn English, because way back then I used to speak French, not English. French was the international language, was the international speaking language. At the UN, I think they still speak French in many situations. At the time, French was it. So to learn also the language. And then one thing after the other one, I learned some people, they asked me to stay. They offered me a green card, which was back in the 80s, so it's different from now. And here I am, 30 some years. I was 20, I'm 59 now. So we're talking about most of my life was here. And I still believe the US is the most valuable place to grow, to learn, to be able to explore. It is a country made for strong people. It is a country made for people that have the will to be able to want to do more, to inspire to do more. Some people because they're greedy, some people because they just want to learn. It's not a country for somebody who wants to do first-time job and work until they're going to retire on the same company. This is not the place. I think Europe, it's more a place, people, learn, they go to school, they come out, they get the job, and they stay with the company until they retire. This is not the place. This is a place for people that are willing to change. I always tell to my colleague in Italy, he said, listen, in Italy, people grow up after school, they go with the same company forever and ever. For me, I cannot hire people until they're 30 for full-time, because they don't want to stay full-time. They want to do 2 years, 3 years, and then go somewhere else to learn something different or to make some more money. And then they come back. So it is a country that is still very young in art. And that's why I decided to come here. But primarily, that's why I decided to stay here. Because to come here was just an experience. To stay here was a decision. To coexist with my culture, my lifestyle in a country that wasn't mine, and I made it mine. It's the fact that I adapted and I maintain my value. And I found the possibility in the 3 islands, then it's in New York, to be able, when I feel like, to speak my language, to watch the news in my own language also, to be connected.
Thank you. We have many questions rolling in for you still. The next one is, what is the biggest difference between the presentation of media content about cultural education in European countries? And what are the taboos in the media in the field of cultural education?
Wow. Well, the presentation of cultural education, I use Europe because, that's really where I come from, but also the experience with Middle East, it's dictated definitely by their culture, most important. But in Europe per se, there still is a good ground of public service. Like I was saying before, is like in Italy, the major network, which is supposed to be the PBS of Italy, is not much doing that anymore because they became commercial. But you have such, leading company that still do that, such also in Italy, the RAI or BBC in England, which they have program and channels, then it's strictly educational. And I think that should be kept alive. So they have less taboos. It's strictly to educate people in the language, in the cultural, in the food, in their experience, interrelation, connectivity between other countries or other culture. In more commercial countries, commercial mean more a capitalistic country, there are so many taboos, but the taboos are not dictated that much about the social opinion, but more about the need of surviving as a structure. That means economically speaking. What sells, what doesn't sell dictates a lot the education, the media education of content. Then you have a situation that are minority, but very important too. I remember when the Teletubby was put on the air in the United States, some politician, I don't even remember what political party, created a whole scene about one of the Teletubby to be gay or not, or to be proper or not proper. That happened when a country is multi-ethnical. The downside of multi-ethnical is they'll crash, within the same society. But over here, the reason why, in my opinion, there are too many taboos in creating content, educational content, media, because created content do not sell, and do not sell sponsor, do not sell audience. So, which I think it's wrong. I think it can do that. And if I say that, it's because you have to be pragmatic. So if a major network will not produce creative content because it cannot make the money back, then that network should be helped, in a certain way. Maybe politically give them a tax break on every content they do that is truly educational, but it doesn't make money back of whatever they invest in the production. Maybe that extra money can be a tax break for them. I don't know. I mean, there is always a way to make it possible, something that important, or to put people that are in the position, or networks or institutions are in a position to be able to afford to do that. Just because they have money, that don't mean they can spend it left and right. You have to understand capitalism to know then the more they make, the more you lose. And necessarily the more you make, the more you're gonna make. It's easier to do this. So you have to find a middle ground or a sustainable way to involve them on the realistic aspect of what they do. And it goes for everything else, foundation and charities and everything else. So I think Europe has definitely, today's day, a much more open programs, for educational, street education, less taboos, although it's going to the direction of being commercial, even if they're public service. US, so many other huge countries like this, I'm not detailed about what sell and doesn't sell, and the taboos are, it doesn't sell enough merchandise to sustain this kind of program, they will produce it, otherwise we don't. If you think about it, Hollywood, which is the major market, makes us 60-40, and 60% is not the movie, it's the merchandise of the movie. That in any program, any country do, especially for children, merchandise, it's a big factor of it, or whatever is their intention to produce or not produce an educational program. And then again, that's my opinion.
Ariel, ask the question.
How do you think the media should work in countries where the press is not free?
Well, the what? It's not free?
Where press is not free.
Fight. Sometimes it's they say the revolution of people, it's a sentiment of the gods. Yeah, definitely we're not going to go that extreme, but the sentiments are that extreme. when you deal with an oppression regime, all bets are off, or value are off. Everything it's not there. You cannot help a situation like that if you not help the country of the regime to benefit out information. Information goes two ways. It doesn't just take your dollar out, but also teach yourself or improve yourself in inform of whatever opinion you are, whatever opinion you have as a regime. It can be extremist. It's what it is. But let the people know, where you stand. So if you can find a way for those regime to show them the possibility of benefit by having the media out, being criticized, it's improve the growth of the individual, of the regime, of the people in the country. It's the only way. Otherwise, it's a black hole. It goes back to my sentiment in the beginning: fight. And I'm against war. I'm against any type thing than physical damage. But I have to support. I have to bring the news out. Support those journalists, those leaders that have the courage to jeopardize their life and make them so, protect them. Today's media, you can be criticism of regime by being outside the country and be protected. Just this morning, I was watching the news early morning about, I think somebody from Iran. There was criticism to a certain part of Iran, and the FBI found some threat against her life. I didn't even know about this woman before, but by bringing news out, you manage to have this woman to have a bigger voice, so be more legitimate on what she's saying, which I can agree or not, I don't know. But that's the only way you could do, support those people in every possible way.
And are all the media independent in the US?
No, I don't know what you mean about independent. There's a different variety of dependency. First of all, the media works for somebody, which is the ownership of it. That's what private is. So if ABC, it's owned by certain, used to be by Walt Disney, by somebody else now, that means in all the editorial part of it has to be contained within the philosophy of the ownership. Some ownership are much more open to self-criticize themselves. Some they don't. Definitely in the US, you have such a variety of media that one is opposition to the other one. So as a regular citizen, you can get your opinion out. And you do not have the dictatorship of media. You do not have a suppressed media. I think you have untruthful media or a manipulated media of it, but there's so many of it, and all at the hands of your iPhone, iPad, or TV, then it's easy for you to make up your mind, at least on the major news. So yeah, the US has the liberty of to be extreme, and at the same time to have somebody who's a counter extreme you, and you can get the yin and yang of both sides of it.
So on that point, how do you filter the spam and misinformation that we stumble across in social media and media in general?
Very good question. It goes to the individual. Education is a big factor. At the end of everything, education is really the base of independency, of freedom. To be educated, it's the basic of be able to free. To be not educated, you are at the mercy of whatever they offer you, culturally, awesome possibility of life. If you are educated, I'm not saying you have to be Ivy League or Harvard University. Education means inform yourself. You can be a self-made man, to be educated and learn and be curious and read and watch different variety. Then you'll be able to be educated enough to make your own opinion. In any other ways, I just cannot see the misinformation now of opinion news or opinion information and now reporting information is so saturated. Then sometimes it's difficult for me, then I live within the media, to believe or not believe something. So I can imagine somebody who does not make a living out of the media, how you can read between the line and get an information real or not real. So it's definitely a big part of education. Prevent is better than repair. That's what I'm saying. So to be educated, it's better to tell them that what they see or what they hear is not true. You don't want to have anybody tell you, no, you're wrong. It's difficult to convince somebody of something else.
And thank you, Mr. Leotta, for a very, very important presentation on the importance of free, independent, and objective media for the continuation of a democratic process. Without that, we know the alternatives, and it is just very, very important for people to be aware of exactly what you said. So I'm very grateful that you were able to come and share your opinions with us. And hopefully many, many people will view this to be able to learn from your very wise perspective. So thank you again very much. And Ariel, thank you very much for continuing your hosting responsibilities. And I just wanted to bring to your attention that next week we have a very interesting young woman who talked about her life story and her focus on cultural independence and progress. So have a very, very good week, and thank you again.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Ariel. Thank you, Mariam. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Mom.
Thank you. We appreciate that very much. Thank you.